Hello and welcome everyone to the final presentation of my Desertified Morocco project, which is my take on the post-apocalypse subject for this year's Creative Process class. Now let me walk you through the project. In the beginning I started collecting references from various sources and created this mood board which shows all the elements that I wanted to have in my project. So we have the traditional riad house in Morocco, which is a courtyard-centered house. Then we have an element of desertification because of climate change, which causes places to be covered in sand, and also a lot of chaotic technological elements retrofitted into places. One of the elements of Moroccan architecture that fascinated me a lot were intricate tile patterns that you can find on ceilings and walls. And because I wanted to make this project 3D, I started to recreate some of these patterns in Substance Designer. I parameterized them because I hoped that I could later on generate a few different results and use them in my 3D scene. After this, I realized I also needed a more holistic approach to get a feeling for the scene I was going to create. That's why I made all these analog sketches showing more bigger overviews, but also some detail elements, and also tried to do the same in a digital environment. I also tried to get a feeling for the urban context that the riad houses are usually located in, and that's why I created these two drawings based on satellite images of the old towns in Moroccan cities. It was then time to plan out the architecture I was actually going to create. And based on this old book by J.E. Painter, I investigated how to create these very distinct archways that you can often find in Moroccan architecture. Using my 2D CAD software, I then created a few different variants of the archways, which I then in turn used as basic elements to iterate through different versions of the courtyard wall for my riad that I was going to create. On the ground floor, we would then have a row of arcades, on top of which we have a small protruding roof structure. And for the first floor, we have a couple of windows through which one can look down on the courtyard, again protected by a small protruding roof structure, all crowned by some fences protecting you to not fall down into the courtyard when you're on top of the roof. I plan to use this design for both shorter sides of a rectangular courtyard, whereas the longer sides would both feature distinct architectural elements. Then it was time to start modeling the scene. Recreating the shapes I designed earlier did not prove to be very difficult, and that's why I had soon built up the whole scene with all these basic architectural elements. As you can see in this top-down shot, I also added this roof structure on top of the courtyard, which would allow for some nice and interesting shadow play. Then did some lighting tests in Maya. This first one, the resolution was a little low, but I still found it an interesting result. However, then I got into ray tracing shadows and tried to play around with shadow intensity and a few different angles from which to build my scene. What initially looked like smooth sailing until now soon turned into a state of crisis, however, when I realized how much detail there was still missing and how hard it would be to edit now that my ZBrush license was gone. It became especially apparent when I started to do some texturing work here. It took me about 2 to 3 hours to get to this point with just one element, and yeah, so I realized this is definitely going to take too long. That was kind of a bitter realization, but what to do now? Well, I decided to retreat to the 2D realm and finally try out photo bashing, which I never did before. My initial results looked fairly mediocre, but I soon started to get the hang of it. And yeah, I created an image that I now consider the final image of this creative process, as you can see it here. The image was created using quite a few of the photographs I also had in my initial mood board, and I think I managed to fit in most of the elements I found very compelling about this project. Yeah, so the desertified state of the house, yeah, the traditional house itself, trashy detail elements, cables, bit of destruction, and also, yeah, a bit of the city context hinted on in the background, so I'm quite happy. Have a look at the image for a few more seconds, and yeah, thank you very much for listening. Feel free to ask questions.